All right, go ahead. We can start and you can begin the interpretation. My fault. That was on me. Go for it.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Sabina y mis pronombres son ella, ella, y estoy aquí con mi cointérprete y Carla. Sus pronombres son ella y ella. Somos miembros de la colectiva de justicia del lenguaje Bancha Lenguas basada en Bulbancha, también conocido como Nueva Orleans. Hoy vamos a proveer interpretación simultánea del inglés al español y español al inglés. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sabina and my pronouns are she, they, and I'm here with my co-interpreter Carla, whose pronouns are she, they as well. We are members of the Bancha Lenguas Language Justice Collective based in Bulbancha, also known as New Orleans. Today we'll be providing simultaneous interpretation from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. Para acceder a la plataforma de interpretación, si estás usando una computadora, haz clic en el icono de globo al pie de tu pantalla con la palabra interpretación y selecciona el idioma que prefieres. En los diapositivos móviles, teléfonos, tabletas, busca 3 puntos que lean más y selecciona ahí tu idioma. Puedes elegir silenciar el audio original si solo quieres oír la interpretación. Para escuchar el audio original, no seleccionas esta opción y puedes cambiar tu selección en cualquier momento. Si no eres bilingüe en inglés y español, te recomendamos que utilices la función de interpretación. To access the interpretation platform. If you're on a computer, click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen with the word interpretation to select the language of your choice. On mobile devices, tablets, phones, look for 3 dots that read more. Click on that to make your selection. You have the option to mute original audio to hear only the voice of the interpreter. If you want to hear the original audio, don't select this option, and you can change your selection at any time. If you are not bilingual in Spanish and English, we recommend you use the interpretation feature. Y ahora, algunos recordatorios importantes. Solo podemos interpretar una voz a la vez. Mantengan sus micrófonos en silencio si no están hablando. Y si tienen audífonos con micrófono, por favor, utilízolos. Notarás también que estamos usando el al final de palabras con género en español. Esto no es un error, es nuestro esfuerzo por crear un lenguaje que rompe con las normas binarias y creando un lenguaje inclusivo. Por favor, hable también a un paso lento y constante. Habla en voz alta y clara y échale un ojo al chat o nos dejan saber si no nos pueden escuchar. And now a few important reminders. We are only able to interpret one voice at a time. Keep your mic on mute when you're not speaking, and if you have headphones with a mic, please use them. You will notice that we're using the sound E at the end of gendered words in Spanish. It's not an error. It's our effort to break with gender binary and create a more inclusive language. Please also remember to speak at a slow and steady pace, loudly and clearly, and let us know if you're having any trouble hearing us. Por último, no sufran en silencio, y gracias por su compromiso en crear un espacio multilingüe. Lastly, don't suffer in silence. Let us know if you have any problem hearing us, and thank you for your commitment to creating a multilingual space.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. So, I am Imani Worthy, and it is with great honor that I am here before you today to open this webinar on behalf of Black Families Love and Unite, Blue. I would like to start today's meeting with an Assata Shakur chant, which is often associated with the Black liberation movement. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. For those of you who don't know, this chant encapsulates the spirits of resistance, unity, and determination in pursuit of freedom and justice. It has been used as a rallying cry in protests and demonstrates advocating for Black families and Black rights and empowerment. So Blue is a collective of parents impacted by family policing and other punitive systems, united in our mission to empower and bring together Black and Brown families. Our vision is unequivocal. We strive to dismantle punitive systems, break free from cycles of violence, and safeguard the integrity and sanctity of our families and communities. At the core of our work lies an unwavering commitment to holding accountable those systems specifically designed to harm us. I want to share with you a land acknowledgement in which we borrowed from North Star Fund. We recognize the Lenape people who were forcibly displaced from their homes. From their ancestral homes. Settler colonialism has continued to violently prohibit the Lenape people and other indigenous communities from assessing their rights to sovereignty and land stewardship. We also acknowledge the cruel violence endured by enslaved Africans and their descendants. Their forced labor and extracted knowledge laid the foundation for the world that we live in today. We honor these communities by actively practicing solidarity and organizing daily to transform our world into a place where everyone has a right to self-determination and dignity. Shamara and I started Blue in September of 2021. And together with our buddy Nashia, we formulated our mission and our vision. We held our first community baby shower in the spring of 2022. We held rallies and met on a bi-weekly basis with 8 other amazing parents. As we gather here today, we share a common vision. We envision communities equipped with the necessary resources for not only survival, but also growth and prosperity. We firmly believe that community members deserve support rather than punishment. Our vision extends to the creation of safe and nurturing environments, liberated from the clutches of punitive harm. We yearn for a reality where our communities receive reparations and investment in harm reduction tools. Above all, we strive for an end to both interpersonal and structural violence. Through the power of collective healing, support, and informed action, we are resolute in our determination to bring about lasting change. We invite you to learn more about our work by following our website, which we'll send out an email after the event. But our website is www.blackfamilieslovingunite.org. And you can also follow our Instagram, which is @blackfamilieslovingunite. We also believe in community, and please reach out to us if there are ways to build, partner, and learn together. We gather today to discuss reparations for families like mine. As a mother, wife, and impacted parent, I bring to you a deeply personal journey that underscores the urgent need for our collective efforts in demanding change. At the age of 30, I experienced my first pregnancy. Initially in denial, it wasn't until I reached 13 weeks that I accepted the reality. Around that time, my husband and I reignited our relationship after being together off and on for 6 years. This brought about feelings of immense fear and anxiety as new parents. I come from a family that raised me with the words, "No one in our family has ever been on public assistance or lived in the projects, and you won't be the first." I was the first. That bogus sense of pride I felt up until pregnancy went out the door. I needed affordable health insurance to care for my unborn child. I had to get Medicaid then, and I was appalled by the treatment received from medical personnel. The struggle to find a doctor was real. It astonished me to discover that hospitals like Montefiore and Jacobi had waiting lists spanning up to 3 months. I was baffled by this predicament. Feeling overwhelmed, I needed prompt medical attention to assure my child's well-being. Eventually, I found a doctor in Mount Vernon where I heard my baby's heartbeat for the first time. At 13 weeks pregnant, Miles was happy, swimming around, bringing a sense of joy. During my pregnancy, I confronted the formidable challenge of gestational diabetes. When my blood sugar went too high at my weekly check-ins, healthcare professionals forewarned me that unless I effectively managed my diabetes, they would report me to ACS, which is New York City's child welfare system, or family policing system, as we call it. After my son was born, Doctors expressed surprise that he did not meet their perceived standards of thriving. I could not get him to latch or take the bottle. Week after week, I diligently brought my son to his pediatrician for weigh-ins, but feeding him became an uphill battle. His fragility increased and his condition deteriorated with each passing day. Eventually, there was an accident that we could not account for. Shockingly, the doctor cited this at his failure to thrive as grounds and the accident as grounds to report the situation to Child Protective Services. Ironically, even the hospital struggled to get my son to take his bottle, leading to a 3-week hospitalization and the insertion of a feeding tube through his nose. Instead of receiving the support I desperately needed, I found myself unjustly labeled as a child abuser and accused of neglecting my son. My pregnancy and raising my son was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. This experience forever altered my perception of hospitals. Though these institutions are intended to provide care, they often wield excessive power over patients without adequately supporting families. Black and Brown families in particular find themselves funneled into interconnected systems such as the family policing system, perpetuating harm. Our interactions with hospital staff, ostensibly aimed at monitoring our children's well-being, often feel more akin to intrusive investigations rather than routine checkups. In light of this, I struggle with trusting hospitals. I had been brainwashed to believe in ACS as a system of support, so I felt it failed me and my family. My mother died during my trial. My son was removed from my care, and I had to give strangers his birth certificate and social security card. I felt as if I was losing my identity. I felt as if I was losing my son's identity. I currently also work as a family advocate at the Center for Family Representation, CF4, and I'm not surprised to hear my clients express similar frustrations. We all say the same thing. In Buddhism, which is my religion, we say there are no coincidences. With all the pain we felt as parents, the question arises, how do we start to think about repair? How do we begin to heal as individuals, as community members? How can we lessen the divide between us? I strongly believe that the concept of repair resonates profoundly with the parents in our community. We've experienced pain from both systemic injustices and interpersonal conflicts. What truly matters isn't our past actions, the harm inflicted upon us, or the ways we've let each other down. It's not about comparison or superiority. Instead, our focus should be on continuous progress, always moving forward as a collective of impacted individuals. Our enemy isn't each other, but systems that have been put in place to harm us. That, my friends, is abolition. It's restorative, and it is love. It is pure freedom. One of my heroes, Angela Davis, said, reparations are not just about money. They are about acknowledgement, accountability, and healing from the deep wounds of systemic injustice. These words resonate deeply as we explore the true essence of reparations. It extends far beyond mere financial compensation. It necessitates the recognition of historical wrongs, the acknowledgement of accountability for perpetuating systemic injustices, and a genuine commitment to healing the profound wounds inflicted upon marginalized communities. Now, let us delve into the heart of today's captivating webinar, aptly titled Repairing the Past, Shaping the Future, Envisioning Reparations for Our Family. This title encapsulates our shared commitment to confronting historical injustices and charting a course toward a future where equity prevails. Before we proceed, I would like to take a moment to express our deep appreciation for the collaboration of Law for Black Lives, especially my boo, Jelani, Erin Cloud, and Lisa Sangoy for your love and your guidance. and our dedicated team, the parents at Black Families Living Unite, our dope board, which includes Jelani, Erin, Shamara Kelly, our co-founder, Tracy Sergenian, and Bianca Shaw, who have worked tirelessly to organize this transformative event. Thank you to the moderators, presenters, and panelists for participating in this historic event. And thank you for all of you who took the time out of your busy day to hear our conversation. Together, we are forging a space where transformative dialogue and actionable change can flourish. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to this webinar. Let us join forces in envisioning a future where reparations cease to be an elusive dream and instead becomes a palpable reality. Together, we can possess the power to create a lasting change. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our co-founder, my ace boon coon, Shamara Kelly, who will share why we are here, the urgent need to repair.
Thank you, Imani. Thank you, Imani. Good evening, everyone. I am Shamara Kelly. I am a survivor and thriver. I am a sister. I am a daughter. I am a friend. And most importantly, I'm a mama of two. I'm also the co-founder of Blue, an organization created by impacted parents for impacted parents. My journey started as a survivor of domestic violence, enduring physical, mental, and emotional abuse for 17 years. With the support of my village, I left that harmful situation and embarked on a new path. As I navigated the system seeking non-punitive services for myself and my children, I realized they were sorely lacking. This experience led me to my role as a community organizer with Blue, where I found purpose. I recognized the need to create something tailored just for impacted parents and children like myself, as well as other survivors often ignored by these systems. Many of us have never felt what it means to be truly free. While we can dream of it, the reality is that even after escaping, survivors often encounter services that don't cater to their unique needs. Whether facing law enforcement or court proceedings, the feeling of being criminalized persists. Our communities require healing, particularly Black and Brown survivors who seek safe spaces, secure housing, genuine legal options, and mental health services detached from government control. Directing those funding to grassroots organizations deeply rooted in their communities is vital. Reparations for survivors entail accountability and healing. This means addressing past harm and offering solutions for repair. I emerged from 17 years of abuse with a determination to improve a system that fell short for me. I wanted to support fellow survivors, be a voice for my children, and advocate for change. My journey was supported by my family, my vow sisters, who reminded me that I wasn't alone or crazy. Learning to navigate various systems while holding them accountable became an enlightening experience for me. Seeking safe spaces among like-minded survivors and impacted parents allowed me to create a support network without judgment. The lack of non-punitive services for someone like me, an African-American survivor, was evident. Over time, my perspective shifted from anger and confusion to a healing journey. Creating safe spaces for open conversations with my children became a cornerstone of my recovery. It was important. Joining a parent organization connected me with fellow impacted families and parents, showing that I wasn't alone, enabling us to educate others about their rights. Survivors often feel criminalized by systems that lack sensitivity. Even after leaving abusive situations, the lack of options can leave them vulnerable. Education and organizations like VOW, Voices of Women, are crucial to centering survivors in that process. Legal proceedings for survivors can be intimidating and triggering, forcing them to relive trauma. Safe spaces can encompass resources on hand, secure housing options, Safe spaces can be encompassing resources on hand, securing housing options, and legal alternatives tailored to survivor situations, such as custody or divorce proceedings. One initiative dear to me was hosting a baby shower for survivors, providing them a safe and valued space. This collective effort demonstrated that survivors are supported by their village beyond a single event. It is essential for survivors and impacted parents to feel safe and connected, especially during difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamara. Thank you. So now we're going to hear from Dorothy Roberts, Dr. Dorothy Roberts. Really quickly, before she graces us, Dr. Dorothy Roberts is an American sociologist, law professor, and social justice advocate. She is the 14th Penn Integrates Knowledge Professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Her work explores the connections between race, gender, and law, focusing on health, social justice, and bioethics. Roberts has published over 100 scholarly articles, book chapters, and co-edited volumes on topics like constitutional law and women's rights. Her latest book, Torn Apart: How the Child Welfare System Destroys Black Families and How Abolition Can Build a Safer World, highlights her dedication to dismantling systemic inequalities and illuminating a path towards justice. But Dorothy Roberts is more than just an academic luminary. She is a champion for the marginalized, a voice for the unheard, and a true embodiment of the abolitionist spirit. Her intentionality in her work, her unwavering compassion, and her steadfast advocacy reflect a deep-rooted commitment to building a safer, more just world for all. As an advocate for parents and families, as a voice of empathy in the world often marked by discord, she epitomizes the power of leading with love. Today, we have the privilege to bask in the wisdom and insights of this incredible woman, this incredible Black woman. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Dorothy Roberts, a trailblazer whose life work embodies the values of understanding, compassion, and the unyielding pursuit of a world where justice knows no bounds. So, without further ado, let us welcome the remarkable Dr. Dorothy Roberts.
Thank you so much, Imani, for that truly beautiful introduction. I'm so honored by it. It was really moving, and it's just been a privilege, honor, joy to be able to engage with you. And I really congratulate you on your wonderful new organization. And thank you for your words of wisdom, which I was so happy to quote in Torn Apart and whenever I can. So thank you for that. I am really honored to be part of this important program. I feel a little bit limited because my role is to point out the history and logic of family policing. I usually spend most of my time talking about abolition, but I know others will do that. So I'm going to stick to my role and talk about what we need to abolish. And I know that others are going to really give an exciting and challenging and thought-provoking and stimulating discussion about what abolition and reparations mean and why we need them. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have slides, and there we go. And as I said, I'm going to be talking about the history and logic of family policing. So let me start with the roots of what's called erroneously the child welfare system or child protection system, which is actually a system of policing. It is a system, as we've already heard, accuses parents and family caregivers, investigates them, punishes them, monitors them, imposes harsh tasks upon them that just makes it harder to care for their children, and takes children away, uses the threat of child removal, and does nothing to help families to support them or to keep children safe. And that system is the way it is today, in part because of its foundations, which we can trace all the way back to the enslavement of African people in the United States. Family separation was an essential aspect of the institution of slavery. Of course, Black people were considered to be chattel property that was upheld by law, and enslavers were deemed the official legal parents. The white male patriarch of the plantation was deemed the official parent of everyone on the plantation. He had authority over all the children, including Black children. And Black parents were not given any legal authority or any legal bonds that were recognized by law to be protected. And that meant that children could be sold away from their families, or a mother or father could be sold away separately. Under law, white enslavers owned as their property Black children from the moment of conception. And so the system we have today is grounded in that oppressive relationship where family separation and denial of family bonds in between Black people was an essential part of this institution that the United States was founded on and that existed for 4 centuries, for most of US history. Now, I say that the official child welfare system for Black children began during the Reconstruction era, immediately after the Civil War. This was a court system that separated Black families, and it was based on child apprenticeship laws that were already in existence or that were reinforced after the Civil War in order to virtually re-enslave Black children. Tens of thousands of Black children were sent back to work to former white enslavers, including sometimes the very people who had enslaved them prior to the Civil War and prior to the 13th and 14th Amendments. And this happened when white people would go to court and claim that Black parents were neglectful, and judges would routinely, by the tens of thousands, support that view and send Black children as so-called apprentices to work for white families. We see a similar kind of oppressive use of child removal and family separation by the US military to win the so-called Indian Wars against indigenous people in the United States around the same time. So in the late 1800s, the US military took up the military strategy of child removal, taking children from Native tribes to be put in military camps and later in boarding schools. And this turned into an official policy of the US government to remove Native children from their homes on grounds of child neglect to be adopted by white families or to be placed in orphanages. And even the story of what happened to white children, the narrative that supporters of this system like to point to, is false. It was never a charitable system to help children, even white children. Foster care for white children was also a means of taking children from their homes and placing them to work for more privileged families, and even putting them on so-called orphan trains, sending these children who did have parents to distant farms to work. We can continue this history. I don't have time to go into all the details, but I want to just highlight some aspects of it. After the civil rights gains of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, we see child removal being used as a backlash against Black communities. And so Southern states began to deny welfare to Black mothers who had just begun to get benefits that white mothers had been entitled to for decades, but the suitable home rules would be used to deny them benefits. And then we see policies that held that if you didn't have a suitable home, you had to give up your children. And then finally, the policy in 1961 that if you didn't have a suitable home, your children would be put in foster care. And we see the financing of foster care being started in the federal government and leading to the mushrooming of the foster care population, mostly because of Black children being taken from their families. Also in the 1980s and 90s, we see a continuation of stereotypes about Black mothers as being biological threats to their children and their communities, and their having children itself being a social problem. The myth that Black women had babies just to get a welfare check and didn't care about them. This was so powerful that it fueled carceral policies that were enacted in the 1990s, including crime control policies that sent more police officers into Black communities, and the end of the federal entitlement to welfare. And then the following year, the Adoption and Safe Families Act that sped up termination of parental rights and had a devastating impact on Black families and continues to this day. We also see that family policing is intimately connected to criminal law enforcement and prisons. And I call it just one giant carceral web where police and caseworkers work together. As Joyce McMillan says, some cops are called caseworkers, and they use similar tactics. They have a similar logic. This also includes criminalizing Black children, including placing Black children in prison-like situations where many have been killed by staff, and making a pathway from foster care into juvenile detention and prison. And all of this is based in a carceral logic. That is a logic that punishes people for their needs, for being in a society that doesn't meet people's needs, and then blaming them for any hardships or needs that they may have in taking care of their children, and applying therapeutic kinds of cures that are based on this idea that parents are pathological, instead of looking to the need for radical social change and punishing resistance against these injustices, instead of supporting the efforts that Black people have, especially Black mothers, have been at the forefront of demanding, and that we'll hear more about today. So this isn't a malfunction of the system when we see these harms. This is what the system was always designed to do, to oppress people. And I'll close with this quote from Malcolm X, whose own family was torn apart by what he calls the welfare people, the family policing system. And he said, he called it a system of legal modern slavery. And he said, I have no mercy or compassion in me for a society that will crush people and then penalize them for not being able to stand up under the weight. And that's exactly what this system does. It is a system of modern day slavery. And as others will explain now, that's why we need to abolish it and why we need reparations for all the people who have been harmed by this deliberately oppressive system. So thank you so much. Again, thanks, Imani, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this important and urgent and wonderful program.
Yay, thank you, Dorothy. And thank you for listening. I mean, I think that's really what it is. You heard me, and I appreciate that. Thank you. So our next section will be our first section, possibilities using a reparations framework. This section will feature organizers, policy experts, and legal workers who are using reparations frameworks creatively to seek and provide relief to people impacted by family policing in the United States and beyond. We will now welcome the moderator, my ED, Black Girl Magic, Tara Cole from the Center for Family Representation.
Thank you so much, Imani. I'm really excited to be a part of this webinar and to dive into this conversation with this group. And I think we should do that. So I'm just going to jump right into the questions. And please feel free, panelists, to, give a brief introduction as you're responding. But my first question is, one of the many uphill battles when it comes to reparations and healing is defeating this idea that reparations and healing are just not possible and thus not worth pursuing. And Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color have heard this across the globe and across issues. For example, we're thinking of the US-based movement for Black reparations. And so assuming this is something that you have also heard, that it's not worth talking about reparations for the violence of family separations and anti-Blackness, racisms, and so on, what brought you to a reparations framing in the work that you're doing?
I can go first. I'll be the brave person. So hi, I'm Jaylani. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the research coordinator at Law for Black Lives. And so I'm really excited to be here and that Law for Black Lives is co-hosting. But to answer the question, I think that anytime you approach someone and not to oversimplify it and say let's do something unprecedented, the response is going to be okay, what's the precedent? And that's not just a legal precedent, that's just does this exist in our world? Why are you even saying these things? What makes you want them? And I think a lot of that is just because part of why our conditions stay the same is because we're told that this is the only reality that there's ever been. And I really appreciate what Dr. Roberts shared is that these systems have not always existed. But when you are, growing up, you're told that they've always existed. There's no way our society can exist without them. And so any way you want to improve society has to fit within, what we're currently living in, the pandemic, economic insecurity, no healthcare, these high rates of maternal mortality, Black and brown kids, essentially overflowing in this foster care system. And so for me, what pushes me in this direction of reparations and abolition as analytical frameworks, but also actual concrete objectives of movement is honestly, it feels like an ancestral call, just because for me as a descendant of enslaved folks, I feel like they confronted this same question of I'm a slave, my mom was a slave, my dad was a slave, my kids are slaves. Everything is telling me that there's nothing but this. From anywhere I slice it, that this is just what it is. But there were folks who were well, I'm going to make a way beyond this. I don't have a choice. And really deeply feeling this collective responsibility about Black folks and all colonized folks' survival. And so for them, it was a combination of violent direct resistance, a lot of what we now call mutual aid, like folks who passed as white, building these lives so they could buy their kin out of slavery. And so like the way I think about it is that like the plantation evolves, but the predicament of like, what do you mean? Like, how do we do something else? Like, is the same question. And we're always going to be asking that question until we're free. And so I just see reparations and abolition as the blueprint. And I'm just a big proponent of not fixing what isn't broken. It worked already. And that's why today looks like today. So I just feel like, where else am I supposed to go? Like analytically, and also as far as dreaming about the future, like what else would I think about? Is how I feel about it.
Mary, Melissa, did you want to jump in on this one?
My name's Mary Burton. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Fearless R2W in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I created Fearless in 2014. We've been a advocacy and education group since, and what we do is we advocate for families who are dealing with child welfare systems here in Canada, well, here in Manitoba. And I've been listening to some of the people speak. And one of the things that I feel really passionate about is what Dr. Dorothy Roberts said about the system not being broken. I say that every chance I get to anybody who will listen. These systems were created to keep the Black and brown people down. They were not created to lift us up or help us out in any way. The so-called Indian Wars, smallpox, you name it, they tried everything to get rid of Indigenous people. Here in Manitoba, there are over 10,000 children in care, and that's just in one province in Canada, 10,000 children in care, and 90% of those children are Indigenous or Black or minority. These systems are not broken. I agree with her 100%. These systems were created to keep families separated and keep the, what's the best way to break somebody? Take their future away. Children are our future. And if they take our children away, we have no future. So my uphill battle is the fact that I am the product of the 60s scoop here in Canada. I was apprehended in the 60s, well, not the 60s, but in the 80s. And I was put into foster care and I was not allowed to go home. So I aged out of care at 18. And then I decided that I was going to keep fighting and keep helping people. So I've been helping families. Oh, I'm dating myself now. Since I was 18 years old. I'm 52 now. So I've been doing it for a very, very long time. And I've been seeing the issues that plague Indigenous people, Black folks, and minority folks, and the newcomers that come to Canada, as I come to Manitoba, the province that I'm in. And although Indigenous and Black folks only make up to 3 to 10% of the population, we're overrepresented. And that tells you something. My uphill battle with this is fighting a system that does not want to help Indigenous and Black folks. But I continue to fight, and I will always fight because we matter as human beings. That's all.
Thank you so much, Mary. I think that my name is Melissa, Drug Policy Alliance. I'm the director of Civil Systems Reform. I use she, her pronouns. Just a quick snapshot, DPA is the leading organization in the US working to end the drug war and repair its harms and build a non-punitive and equitable and regulated drug market. And we're just so grateful. I'm so grateful to Black Families, Love and Unite, and Law for Black Lives for hosting this conversation today. I think when we're talking about reparations and healing and people saying it's not possible and therefore not worth pursuing, I think the gut response to that, as we've just been discussing, is it's necessary. Like there's no, should it happen, can it happen? It has to happen. And it's not possible until we do it, right? And we've done that multiple times. And I think in responding to those who are hesitant, who are naysayers, and particularly people from outside the community, I hear this often from white people who are attempting to kind of shrug off the responsibility or to kind of sidestep the very real responsibility of tearing down structural racism and white supremacy in all the ways that it shows up. And the drug war is one of those huge ways. And so we see this consistently in our work and the way that it's been weaponized on people. And my DPA colleagues, Deanna King and Cassandra Frederick and Kristen May, developed this framework in a lot of the conversations, the work that we were doing of acknowledge, atone, and act as we were beginning to engage in this work and in community with people who had been on the front lines of this fight for decades. And really recognizing that reparations and restitution are a crucial part of the action that's needed in the face of harm. It's not enough to just say, this thing happened, oh, these policies led to this outcome, the whole unintended consequences label that's thrown around so often, when it was really clear from the jump, like it was designed that way. So if that's the case, then let's be clear about what needs to happen as we're taking it down. And I think I take inspiration in a lot of this fight in all of the new phases and all of the new fronts in which I'm engaged in it from some of the arc that we saw in our work around marijuana justice in New York, where conversations for a long time had broached on the extreme racial disparities and who was impacted, but there was really little bandwidth or attention within the mainstream conversation for talking about what restitution for that horrific harm that was caused would actually look like if people even like deigned to recognize that it needed to happen and that restitution was required. So in a lot of that work and a lot of that campaign, which really highlighted the Jane Crow aspects of the marijuana arrest crusade and the way that it was really weaponized in terms of tearing apart families, really emphasized that the solutions and the atonement following that legalization process needed to be as comprehensive as the harms that were done. We're still definitely in that fight, but specifically within that frame, looking to establish community reinvestment with the legalization revenue. When we brought that to the space initially, it really rocked people who thought that it was just about like, oh no, free the weed. And we're like, no, it's freeing the people. Like that's where the impact, that's where the harm has been done. That's where we need to put the attention and the resources and the restitution. And then it quickly flipped and that got, people were trying to co-opt it in terms of talking about like, oh, well, in that case, legalization is going to solve racism. It'll be the end all be all of like all the reparations that need to happen. Like, no. Like we're clear, like so much more is needed, especially when we're talking about the devastation of family separations and family policing. And it's clearly not enough to just turn the page and say like, oh, it's our bad. Like, we're not going to do that anymore, which we're not even at that point yet. But really vital, I think, to ensure that we're actually taking the intentional action to repair the harm and follow the lead of impacted people and what that looks like. And build the road while we're walking it. Just because it hasn't been done in a specific context doesn't mean that it shouldn't or can't or mustn't.
Thank you. I think that comparison makes a lot of sense. And it ties into the next thing that I wanted to ask you all about, which is the concepts of reparations and restorative justice and abolition. They've all become more popular in recent years, in part because of, kind of what you've just been talking about, Melissa. But how exactly are you thinking about and applying these concepts in your work, Jelani, Mary? I don't know if you want to jump in first, since Melissa kind of already started to touch on that.
Well, what we do at Fearless is we have what we call restorative justice circles. And in those restorative justice circles, we will have the child welfare agency, the families, an advocate for the family, and then a lawyer, and then Fearless. Because we want to have everybody at the table, because the restorative justice aspect comes from an Indigenous way of being. And so I am an Indigenous grandmother. I'm an elder. Well, sorry, no, I'm not an elder. I'm a knowledge keeper. I'm not an elder yet. And it has nothing to do with age, honestly. I know some young people who are like 20, 30 years old who are called elders. I'm a knowledge keeper. And so I hold that knowledge of restorative justice circles. And so I freely give it to people, and I use it widely in our professional daily goings on with people and with agencies and with government and with families. Because in Manitoba, child welfare is I can't remember who said it, but somebody said it's family policing. And it is very much so family policing here in Manitoba. And so what we do is we take that extra layer of Indigenous knowledge on restorative justice, and we apply it. And we find that that is one of the best ways that we have as a tool to fight against the child welfare system that is rigged to work against minorities, Indigenous people, and Black women and Black children. And it's the only fair way to do any type of education or advocacy for our families. And that's why I personally use it. I also, I'm a legislation geek, so I kind of read up on legislation whenever it changes, so that I have a little bit of an extra layer of knowledge in my pocket to use against them. Thank you.
I can jump in. So first, I also just wanted to flag for folks to be mindful of the pace that I talked with, so that the interpreters are able to catch everything. But to answer the question, I am a pretty young person in the reparations space. Just how I answered the other question, like I think about it as generational and ancestral. And so I'm 25, so I just got here in terms of arriving to the space. And so I think a lot about my relationship to the work, being like taking a look around, seeing where I fit in. And so something that I've observed over the last year, like as I've been like really immersed in this space, is that I just feel like these frameworks are already being applied and have always been applied. And so, for example, movement elders, like, and organizational leaders in this space embrace like the United Nations framework for reparations, for example, which has 5 elements. And essentially the UN's position is, you know, for if reparations is something that's happening, these 5 elements should be present. And in a much longer and accessible jargony document, they're like, here's some examples of what that could look like. And so the reason that a lot of folks have embraced it in this US-based Black reparations movement is, one, having to be really honest and saying, you know, we need the legitimacy that international law gives us if we're going to do this legislatively or through a lawsuit, or, you know, trying to get some kind of executive action, which I understand. But 2, like more practically, as far as when we're organizing, is that a lot of the conversation right now, for example, is very like compensation only. And thinking about a lot of like the anti-capitalists I read, that's just not going to be enough. I'm also just really cognizant of the fact that like every few years, like there'll be like a Black celebrity who has all the money that I could never fathom, and they still get racially profiled. They still catch RICO charges. They still, you know, or they're just like, I can't really transition after I stop playing sports or I stop rapping because I can't go back into society because I'm just going to be Black there. But being Black and rich, like there's a little bit of sauce there, and I can navigate that space, you know, just fine. And so even thinking smaller, like we got stimulus checks and the government was like, so everyone's student loans are going to be paid back tomorrow, right? Like, you know, even when we get a little bit of money, we're not able to just kind of buy our way out of these experiences. And so I think that there's definitely like a shift that is happening as far as the utility of these legal frameworks and the utility of trying to do this through the state and trying to get the state involved. And I think that some people are trying to suggest that shift is generational, which to me is disrespectful, because I'm thinking about people like Dr. Roberts and Dr. Davis, who are not 25, who I, you know, have read and who to me like feel like mentors, parents, mothers, and movement and things like that, who I'm then reading as a younger person. And so I'm like, no, everybody's been on this page forever. Like I don't exist without somebody else being on this page first. And so, you know, with that, like I think that how I'm trying to think about it now, and it's a little bit of like a difficult, you know, tension-filled place as a lawyer, but thinking about what does it mean to take these frameworks and say, okay, like without the state, whether that's collaboration or trying to do it through the state, like how do I make these things exist? And people think it's funny as a lawyer, but like to me, like I want to be free more than I want a job, respectfully. If I'm free, I don't need a job because I'm not paying rent because we're all just hanging out together and having a great time and frolicking through meadows or something. So I'm also just not worried about it. If we do it right, I don't have to worry about a job anyway. But I think that like, thinking about how I'm applying it, like I try to be in this space where I'm minimizing harm instead of leading the space as the lawyer and saying I'm the lawyer and so you must follow. And I think that like harm minimization like looks different depending on what kind of lawyer you are. Like if you're doing family defense, like making sure that families stay together as much as you can. In a criminal defense space, making sure folks aren't getting locked up. I come from a reproductive justice background, and so there are a lot of lawyers right now trying to figure out like how do we keep the state from getting even closer to these reproductive decisions, even as they criminalize them. And so I think that that's the page we need to be on. Like, I think that's how we need to be thinking about these frameworks, just because like Dr. Roberts already, you know, highlighted, if the state wanted to stop family policing, like they would have said, this sucks. We're going to do something else. We're so sorry. And they have chances to do it all the time. Like similar to how, like, you know, 2020, everyone was like, wow, this is the moment. The state could have said, okay, every police department, we're just not doing that anymore. It didn't. It's expanded it, particularly through, you know, really emphasizing, you know, digital surveillance. Like I'm based in Queens. And so I'm like, cool, every time I go to Times Square now, you know, Madison Square Garden can, you know, look at my face and log that data and whatever. But even, you know, going earlier, I'm really glad that Dr. Robertson brought up, you know, ASFA, because in the early 90s, when all of these kids were, you know, overflowing in this system, the state said, okay, we need to free them up for adoption, you know, like their dogs at the pound, instead of saying, okay, this has gotten out of hand. They said, how do we do this better? And every time there's an opportunity, they go, how do I do this better? Like, how do I facilitate violence better? And so I'm just like, we need to stop asking them to like questions. And them is, you know, the president, the Supreme Court, the whoever, like, stop asking them anything. We don't need to ask them anything. And like, again, as being, you know, a student of history first, like I'm of the insight that slavery did not end because of the 13th Amendment. It hasn't ended at all, but it ended because my ancestors said, I'm over it. I'm going to start burning plantations down and y'all can move or be moved. And that's always how things have happened. And like, it's not, you know, the prettiest way to get there. Like, it's not, you know, like a romantic, you know, notion, but that's how things get done. And if we like love ourselves and love our people and love our ancestors and really, you know, take that collective responsibility for each other's survival seriously, like that's what we'll do too. So I'll leave it there.
I think that's a great place to leave it. I'm not sure if we have time for one more question or if we should. One more question? No. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for engaging in this conversation. This is really great.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Jelani. Thank you, Mary Burton. And thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you so much. Jelani, we don't got to ask them anything. I felt that. So we're going to move on to our second section, section 2, which is understanding the harm in our own backyard, family policing and BIPOC plus poor communities in the US. So this section will feature organizers, policy experts, and legal workers with expertise both through lived experience and professionally in the harm Black and Brown communities are facing at the hands of the US family policing system. This is going to be moderated by Jelani.
Hello, so it's me again, but just for the interpretation in the transcript, I'm Jaylani still. My pronouns are still they, them. I still work at Law for Black Lives. And so I'm really excited to moderate this section on the panel. Kristen Hernandez is my best friend, so I love that. And I've also learned so much from the other two panelists as well. And so yeah, just really grateful to be sharing, I guess, screen space with y'all. So I'll just get into it. But just as a note, I know y'all are all coming from different positions, like Kristen is a lawyer, for example, and I know both Justice and Nashia are directly impacted and also organizers. So definitely feel free if you're like, this question doesn't make sense for me, to pass it and yeah, so it's up to y'all. Choose your own adventure, I guess. But I'll ask the first question. So each of you are showing up in this work in different ways, like I already noted. And so I think that it would be really great if each of you could share a bit about the scope of your work and how you're attempting to apply these abolitionist and reparations framings in your work. And whoever wants to get us started.
I can go first. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nashia, pronouns she and her. I'm showing up in this space wearing many hats, a few hats. So I'm a parent organizer at RISE, a family parent impacted organization. And I'm also showing up as a VOW member and a VOW board member, a domestic violence organization that supports survivors of domestic violence. And I'm also here sharing space with Blue as an organizer. So I would just start at the core of Black Families Love and Unite lies a focus on organizing and advocacy. And Black Families Love and Unite is committed to exploring the concept of reparations and understanding that significance as we've been speaking about. So through this exploration, we aim to inform discussions that contribute to collective healing, support within communities, and having webinars like this. So central to Black Families Love and Unite's approach is the involvement of community members in shaping our vision and campaigns. And also we believe in the power of incorporating lived experiences, perspectives, and aspirations in order to drive meaningful change. This collaborative aspect is pivotal, so and holds also immense importance to us too. So as abolitionists, we firmly believe in embracing restorative approaches to effective change. While this collective is composed of parents with diverse ideals, values, and thoughts, we also embrace and acknowledge that differences do exist. However, when it comes to advocating for change, we unite under the banner of abolitionism to collectively push for meaningful and impactful transformations. One key organizing platform is Parents Speak Up within Black Families Love and Unite. Parents Speak Up holds bi-weekly meetings. These meetings serve as a safe space for parents to come together, share their experiences, their voices, and participate in advocating for change that they wish to see in their community and in the world. By employing abolitionist and reparative justice framings, we strive to create a space where our voices and families' voices, impacted families impacted by policing, can be amplified and their needs addressed with empathy, compassion, and a shared commitment to a more equitable and just future. Oh, and anyone else can jump in.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Justice Gatson. I use she, they pronouns. And I'm the founder and director of a reproductive justice organization called Real Justice Network. And we are comprised of survivors of violence. And we advocate for survivors of violence, and specifically intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, and state violence, which is often overlooked and forgotten, but is a really big part of our work. Many of us as survivors of violence, we are also birth workers, and we're doulas, midwives in training. And so our work does really parallel when we see the onset of criminalization happening right in the labor room sometimes. And we're there to intersect that. That's a big part of the work that we do as healers too, to be there in that special time for a family, but knowing that they are working within a system that does not care for them. And so one of the things that we do is we provide a safe space for our families to engage. We provide a safe space for our survivors to heal and to use that healing to become empowered and to use that empowerment to then help other families who were suffering just like they were. So it's really, each one teach one for real and reach back and pull up for real, because we have to take care of each other. We keep us safe. I think we heard from the beginnings of how, these so-called family protective systems were enshrined. They were not here to protect us. And so it really speaks very loudly and clearly to the sentiment that we do and we always have kept each other safe. And that is a part of the work that we continue to do with our bailout program. We have a program where I call it bail out, keep out, because there's no way we're going to bail you out and not figure out how to keep you out. So, and really thinking about what our ancestors had to do. Thank you, Mary Hooks, for giving this to us. This is an extension of slavery. And I like to put it in a different context. I think of us as prisoners of war, because anytime you go to a continent and you kidnap people and you take them from their homeland, you are really taking prisoners of war. We resisted, and people need to know that. That's the other part of warring. We resisted, and we still resist. So we resist today by using money to go bail our siblings and get them up out of the cell, get them up out of the hole, and bring them to a space where we can love on them, where we can bring them up so they can then do what's necessary to fight for themselves. So applying an abolitionist and a reparative framework is critical. It's really important in order to break and destroy these systems, because we are not here to aid them and to make them better. We know they can never be better. They must be destroyed. And we must do better than our oppressors. We can't repackage something, put a bow on it and says, okay, it's better, it's good. It is not. And so if it's rotten to the core, it is not for us. I'll stop there because I could keep going. But that's just a little bit about who we are and how we come and our approach to the work. And I'm really thankful to be sharing space with all of the amazing people on the panel today.
I'll hop in. So my name is Kristen Hernandez. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a family's defense attorney. So I represent parents who are accused of abuse and neglect in court. Was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. Soundview, always have to rep. And I'm so excited, nervous, and humbled to be part of this convo today. So this question about applying abolitionist and reparative framings in my work as a family defense attorney is something that I personally struggle with in my role as an attorney. And I think my answer to this question touches on a little bit of what Jelani had said about minimizing harm. I guess that's why we're best friends. So, I mean, as a family defense attorney, I have immense responsibility to families that I work with, and I'm accountable to those families. I have to be accountable to those families, but I also have an immense amount of privilege as an attorney. And so, I mean, being in these spaces where we're hearing the voices of impacted parents, children, and organizers, it's important to have that grounding and recognition that in this space and in this work, we attorneys have to use families as our guiding post and as our compass. And I say this in recognition of the fact that as family defense attorneys, we are complicit in the instrumentalities of the family policing system. we are complicit in a system that incentivizes us to push services or counsel parents in ways that can extend state supervision into their lives, and ACS supervision, Administration for Children's Services, as we call it in New York, ACS CPS supervision in their lives in exchange for babies coming home, right? So being a family defense attorney is not in and of itself actually abolitionist. Defense attorneys like me are agents of this system. We are part of this carceral web that Dr. Roberts touched upon, right? Our jobs are enabled by the system. So we cannot be employed in our current professions if there's not a family regulation system. And so I really do believe that the only thing we could do, the primary thing we can do, is minimize harm, to reduce harm that parents do experience through these systems, through the family policing system. And sometimes reducing the scope of harm and supporting a parent means making a referral for services that CPS is asking for. So, I mean, in my role as an attorney, I cannot obviate or eliminate harm because the family regulation system has at its core violence, racialized violence, the violence of ableism, the violence of drug condemnation, the violence attended to the criminalization of poverty. And that said, there are things that we can strive to do as attorneys in this role, shifting narratives in the family policing system, challenging the way that judges and family policing agents conceptualize, treat, and speak to Black and Brown families. We can use this role as well to track data and information about the vast injustices of this system and to try to hold other agents in this system accountable for their harm and work to keep families together. But I really do believe, in terms of abolitionist framing in this work, my job and my role is to minimize harm.
Thank y'all so much. I really, really appreciated all of your answers and what you've shared so far. So I'll shift us to our next question. So in 2020, a lot of these calls to like defund and abolish the police really failed to include, CPS workers in that and to really talk about family policing, at least in the mainstream. And a lot of these calls even said, like, replace police with social workers, like replace them with, these counselors who, to some of these people who aren't impacted, they're, the more compassionate, route to go down. And so for folks here who might not understand it or might just now kind of be coming to this understanding of CPS as not being much different than, again, being in New York, the NYPD, but like everybody's PD. Could you, touch a little bit more on why? And so maybe this question feels better for Justice and Nishia, but definitely, Kristen, if you want to jump in with your experiences too.
Yeah, sure. I will definitely take this question. After George Floyd, everybody was, trying to reach out and talk to grassroots organizers. They, tapping us to come on their platforms. And so there was a big university, who wanted me to talk to their social work department. And I was like, are y'all sure? Do y'all want me to talk to them, really? And they said yes. So I did. And I don't think that they were ready for what I told them. They wanted to know, how do we mitigate harm? How do we not do this? How do we not do that? And I said, well, you're either going to not finish your degree program, or you're going to spend all of your time pushing and agitating. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to push and agitate because you are seen as harmful in Black and Brown communities? Because you are. Because you cannot show up alone. You show up with police, which further impacts and leaves terror. The amount of times that I get a call from a family that says, Justice, can you be with us because CPS is coming? The amount of fear. And so, that was something, pulling the blinders off of that group of people about this is what it is. It's systemic. Just because you're a good person and you joined it doesn't change it. Are you going to agitate enough? Are you going to agitate all the way to the, and then what's going to happen there? Is the system going to swallow you up? Are you going to then become a part of the harm that's happening? And so those were real questions for people to grapple with, because the fact of the matter is, while I was doing those panels, I was in fact getting calls from parents who, and one in particular, I remember she didn't have lights. She didn't have electricity. She had lights. We're clever. We're creative. And her lights were safe. They were battery operated lights, but yet and still, she did not have electricity. And so the state forced her to put her daughter someplace she would have never done. And she confided, she says, Justice, I've got a cousin, but I, wouldn't want to send any of my children there. But she was forced to do that. And to me, the simple, most impactful, most helpful thing would have been for the state to pay the light bill. So we have traumatized the child, placed her over here with a pregnant mama. This particular mom was pregnant at the time. And so imagine the emotional and mental stress that she was going through while trying to comply. And then oftentimes it's got to take a parenting class. And then they add up. And then they add up in other ways, like they charge, right? I don't know, they charge for a lot of those parenting classes. And so parents are expected to attend this class on top of all the many other things that they have to do, including hold down a job and pay for it when they couldn't pay for the light bill in the first place. And so this just brings us full circle on what is it that we are doing? Do we have a system here that really helps parents or not? And we are going to side with not, because we've seen too many times where it hasn't, where a small thing has become so out of control that it has made a family go into debt trying to keep up with classes, losing housing to keep up with classes, and then getting in trouble for not having house. It's a vicious cycle. It is a vicious cycle. And so, that is some real life for what our people are going through right now in community. I'm going to get a call tomorrow, y'all. Yeah.
I can jump in. So CPS, Child Protective Specialist, so they call them, right? So CPS and NYPD, of course, I think they are equivalent into that they both respond to calls and reports of child abuse and or neglect. And they both use investigative skills. NYPD responds to reports of various crimes and also investigates some CPS investigations as well. CPS oftentimes will contact the NYPD, as Justice Gatson said, accompany NYPD on these visits because either the family has been deemed, aggressive or violent, or you're telling these families you're going to take their children away. Someone is going to be just a little bit angry, and they both lead to racial and biased tactics and family policing outcomes. So it's policing and surveillance any way you wrap it. It is a cycle. So some people, depending on who you ask, will say both systems can be seen as and charged as keeping us safe, right, and or saving our children from abusive situations. And at the same time, both of them has also lost trust with families, lost trust in the communities, and they come with negative experiences, violence, disregard, and trauma. Both involved a form of control and intervention, and they lead to separation of families and have the potential to perpetuate the cycles of trauma. Again, as we've been hearing since the start of this webinar, both disproportionately affect marginalized communities, leading to concerns of also systemic injustice as well. The child welfare system, the family policing system, family regulation system, and the carceral system, they both have parallels in which they, in terms of impacting individuals and families. CPS, as Justice Gassett just said, they'll come with their list, with CPS's list of how you can prove your innocence or how you can prove your worth or as a parent and you worthy of taking care of your children. NYPD does the same thing. Once you're in, and they criminalize you. But I'll stop there.
I have nothing to add.
I was just making sure. I didn't want you to feel like I was like, I don't care. But thank you for the sign. So for our last question, I feel like all of you have touched on this already in different ways. So really just trying to give y'all more space if there's other things you want to add. But kind of going back to the overall theme of the webinar, there are people who don't think that it's possible or, necessary to think creatively about ending these systems. And really like providing these holistic reparations to families. And so if y'all have any other words you'd like to share around, whether you believe in the possibility of repair and healing, whether you're skeptical of it, what might it actually look like? Thinking about like what Justice had offered around like the state could have just paid the light bill and that could have been that. So it sounds like a lot of, what you've already said has been around just letting folks live and raise their children, controversial to some. But yeah, if y'all have anything else to add, I just wanted to give y'all a few minutes to do so.
So I can start. So yes, I do believe in the possibility of repair and healing to families harmed by the family policing system. I think a way to do this is acknowledgement of harm and systemic oppression and accountability, right? So let impacted families know their worth and have their experiences uplifted in a way that is respected, or deemed respected, and valued. We need to know that we're valued. Impacted families need to know that they're valued and that their opinion and their lives matter. And also that they have stake in how they want to be treated. And they need and also allies to follow suit, right? The skepticism part and the possibility of repairing and healing lies in just how like media and people who are not in spaces like this look at situations. So a prime example of that is there was a recent, I don't know if you guys who watches the news, but there was a recent incident with Kai Cenat. He's a YouTuber. He was in Union Square, New York City in Union Square, doing a gaming giveaway, giving away gift cards for like streaming and gaming stuff. And the way the media coverage was, oh, look at these people. This area is unsafe. And it was a bunch of, his followings include young people, teenagers, adults, celebrities, other YouTubers, but the way the media covered it was something is wrong. Like, this is why they need more policing. This is why we need more policing for these events. And I think Jelani touched on it earlier. If we have AI and all these cameras in Times Square, for sure, NYPD, like everyone knew that this event was happening. There could have been some safety and maybe something put in place there, but it just looked a little weird. They allowed half of the world to show up in Union Square, and it was an individual problem. So yes, there were individuals there who were causing havoc and disrespecting, just bystanders and people on the street, but they waited until something happened to say, see, this is why we or they cannot hold events. This is why we need more police, on transit, in the streets, in schools, and these students, that they started talking about school. Like, what does school have to do with this YouTuber event? Nobody was there speaking about that he was trying to do a good deed, giving families and kids who are interested in gaming, giving them these gift cards to get their own thing. So that's where the skepticism part lies in it for me. We would not have seen it at Swiftie, at a Taylor Swift concert. We wouldn't have seen barricades, badges, and guns at a Swiftie space. I don't think we would have. So this repair and healing can look like addressing and acknowledgement of harm and systemic oppression, addressing racist policy that's used to perpetuate and further that harm. Monetary avenues, as Justice mentioned already, or just becoming allies to affected communities and not shifting away from that, like showing up in spaces and saying, that you stand with impacted families and that you are against system and for abolishing harmful tactics. Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe in it. I have to believe in it. And it's been done before, but not in a way that will help us. So to say that we can't do reparations, it's just not true. The history is there. White slave owners or white kidnappers, I'll say, they received reparations for emancipation, but so did the Japanese World War II folks who were detained and other people. But healing has to happen. None of this, we can't get to where we are until we are healed. That's a part of it. We have been so traumatized and so destroyed by this system, by these systems. Look at it. There are many, many systems, educational, health, all of them that come for us on a daily basis. And so repair has to happen, and for my kiddos, I think about for the little boys I met in St. Louis during the Stockley protest. Jason Stockley was a police officer who killed a Black man in St. Louis. And so there was an uprising. I met these little boys on the corner, and they were probably about, 8, 9 years old, going to the protest, resisting. They saw me and they asked me, they said, do you have any? We were all had on masks because they were continuously gassing people. And so they were like, man, we don't have any masks. But I gave them a bunch of masks and they continued on to the protests. And I think about those little boys sometimes. I think about they are the future of resistance, and not just the future of resistance, they were resisting that day as young people. And so, yes, when I think about what we owe them, it is absolutely possible and attainable, and we will have it one day.
So I'm really reflective of and thoughtful about what a lot of other speakers have touched upon with respect to imagination and the scope of what is possible. And I think for me, it's helpful to think about, what confines our imagination, right? We exist within the bounds of what really is this totalizing ideological system, or this total system of thinking, knowing, and orienting ourselves to the world. And the world ingrains within us so early that we have to keep children safe through means that are inherently violent. And that's so deeply limiting in terms of what we can even dream of as individuals, right? And so our very concept of justice, which the system and all of its forces, the system and all of its forces calls us to confuse justice with healing and repair. Justice as the system conceptualizes it. It's informed by a system in which justice is marked by the violence of removing people from society, removing people from their homes, removing people from within human-made borders, removing people from their land, removing children from their families, removing people's agency and dignity by tearing people from communities, specifically people who are deemed socially, politically, economically undesirable, tearing them from community. And so the family policing and criminal legal systems frame violence as justice. And that system cannot be the same system that effectuates repair and healing. And so I see Imani, so I'm feeling my cue to wrap up. So I do want to say, this system that does effectuate violence. And specifically in family court, we hear judges all the time say, right, the Family Court Act is not punitive. This is not a punitive system. This is about, I've heard judges say, this is about healing, right? But uses a violent means to effectuate healing, right? And so I don't know that healing can come from within that system, but I do believe that healing and repair can and must come from communities of folks impacted by these systems. And with that, I'll end.
Thank y'all so much. Literally, truly such beautiful answers. And again, like just really grateful to share screen space with y'all. And so I can pass it back to Imani. Thank y'all so much.
Woo! Yes, I am hype. Oh gosh, thank you so much, Jelani, Justice, Kristen, and my boo Nashia for this dope section. Thank you, thank you. So our third section is titled Creating Conditions for Systemic and Interpersonal Healing. So this section will feature an impacted parent organizer and an impacted youth or non-parent organizer in conversation about the nuances of harm doer and victim survivor as it relates to systemic and interpersonal violence. I am so honored to welcome Trisha Stevens, who is another one of my sheroes. Thank you so much. I'm going to send it to you, Trisha.
Thank you so much, Imani, and thank you for inviting me to share space with these powerful women. So we're going to have a conversation. During the course of the last hour and a half, we heard folks invoke the ancestors and reminded us, Sister Justice reminded us that we've never been party to our own pain universally. We've always sought healing. We know how to do this, whether it's going and fighting with the power of money these days, or I like to say back in the day, I'm right now in Georgia. I spoke to Imani yesterday, and I went to Stone Mountain and I visited these historical village where there was a slave hut. And they showed the inside of the hut that housed enslaved people. And all I could think was those same people from these very humble beginnings, this is where we come from and we're still standing here. And pain alone cannot account for why we are standing here. Pain would have destroyed us. So we are here today to talk about healing and repair, as our esteemed panelists before us talked about. And you come from places, different avenues, each of you, Shamara, Nancy, and Tanisha, places where there's a simultaneous understanding of pain in life, but also the power of life, right? The power that lives within to fight that pain. And so I want to start this conversation by asking each of you to share, what does healing mean for you? And how do you think it's possible for our community that really deals with systemic, interpersonal, pain at different levels, trauma at different levels? What do you think is possible for healing and repair? Anyone can start.
I can go. Take this first. What healing looks like to me is going back to the community, right? Going back to our roots, and having conversations, right? And whether it's uncomfortable conversations or not, is going back to the root, going back to the community and speaking about collective conversations and bringing it back, right? And just seeing how we can either find solutions to repair, but also to see how we can organize, right, around different issues. So I feel like healing to me is going back to the community, getting the root, and getting into action.
I could jump in if I can. Okay, let me introduce myself, Nancy Fortunato. I am a parent impacted and I wear many hats as well, and a member of Blue. I believe healing at multiple levels is complex. It demands, empathy, accountability, and justice. To begin this work, we must be able to put ourselves in somebody else's position for the purpose of awareness and amplifying the voices of those who have been harmed, while creating safe spaces for healing and trust. It goes beyond just healing the mind. It's really about healing the soul. It's a profound journey for self-awareness, acceptance, and safety to mend the deeper wounds caused by victimization, racism, and historical trauma. We must have a higher level of consciousness. I always say that because I really believe that sometimes we do not have that deep-rooted consciousness of understanding what is to be impacted, what it is to be in harm, especially harm within your family, harm within generational, what that means for us as people of color. And then, so if once we understand that, then we could create, a community of healing, because only healed people can heal others. And that's what I want to say.
You have to unmute, Tanisha. Unmute.
Start over when you unmute, Tanisha. We want to hear everything.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanisha Sanders. I'm a formerly incarcerated parent, also a parent dealt with the child welfare system. You all just gave me chills today, and I'm just truly honored to be here and hear all that I know I go through and say every single day. Change, change. Myself, a Brooklynite all my life, but I'm one that doesn't have a problem venturing out. I like to know what's going on in communities. I have kids, I want to know what they're around, and in dealing with that, I became a social butterfly, which affected me to have to endure the child welfare system and feeling like there was no support for me. I had to learn, I had to be my own advocate. I remember going and asking, I need to see a parent advocate. I need assistance, calling from being incarcerated, couldn't do it. Having a program sponsored to bring my kids to me faithfully every month, twice a month, to be able to still parent. I was told, who said you can't parent from prison? I did that. And with that being so, I learned to hear other people's stories. I learned to be that listening ear and say, all that you've learned, utilize that. Utilize that. They don't know a lot of things. They're afraid of a lot of things. The system failed them. I'm scared to ask this because they're going to take my kids. You've all just do so many things out there that is so true, even to this day. So if they don't know, what are they going to do? Oh, just leave it and throw it, get discouraged, give up. So if there's nobody to testify and tell them a story of a testimony as a lesson, this is what we're here for today. My baby was removed from me for her first birthday. My baby girl is now 14 years old. The strength of her learning to be her own advocate and learning she has a voice. And you have an amazing story behind all that you endured. And the motivation that keeps me going. I was all tricked up of what to say. And Imani says to me, Tanisha, you said something to me, a story, and I'll never forget. That's what you are. That is who you are. And you just be you and let it go. Let it go. And that's what I had to do here today and say, you know what? Community change. I don't know my community, but I'm learning my community. Learning to say, you know what? The young boys on the corner, the angriness, it stems from somewhere. Whether it was being let down through the system, youth detention center, foster care system. They coming through the jail systems and they're angry because they feel the system failed them. Everybody failed them. There's nobody for them. You got to give them an outlook to grasp that attention that we're here for you. There is people here for you. We are a community. Doesn't matter what borough we're from. We stand as one. We stand as one. And I'm not going to take too much or tell me if I gotta stop now, because I'm on a roll now. I'm on a roll now.
You
And
are on a roll, Tanisha. Please keep going.
And I just go through experiences. I remember going to South Carolina during the pandemic because I went to visit and I understood their child welfare system was really nothing there. Rise did a interview with a organization down there, and I said to them, I'm going to reach out to these people and see what's going on down here because I know families that need services. And today I'm proud to say that that woman, that young lady, had to make the initiative to take that step. I couldn't force her. Her family couldn't force her. She has done it. She has all 3 of her kids back through that system. And me learning that my healing process had to take place before I can heal anybody. And I've learned that at the ITM program. Hurt people, and heal people, heal people. We have to separate the two, you know?
So I so appreciate the honest power, right? It's like, it gives me chills because I'm thinking about all the threads that ran through today. And I heard a few things. I heard reaching out when it's scary. So because you don't know people, you might feel like they may reject you. You might not they may not receive your message, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a lot to open up about your own experience and trust that somebody will be touched in some positive way. But that's really, it's a risk, right? And that's the risk of something good happening, because we know if you don't do anything at all, the risk is also there that nothing will happen and nothing will change. So I want to ask you about a word that came up in Justice Gatson's discussions earlier around creating safe spaces that facilitate healing.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be at any level because the healing is not only systemic, and that feels like a huge lift sometimes, but sometimes the healing closer to home
Mm-hmm.
is pretty tough, right? So sometimes the healing has to be here first, and then you can extend it outwards. So what are some of the things that worked for you, if you feel like sharing, or that you think other people can use? And I see, Shamara, you were nodding when Tanisha was talking. You were nodding. I'm a professor, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick on you. I'm sorry.
All right.
If you want to pass, you can. But if you go on right ahead. I feel like you have to share.
I know for myself, right, being a survivor of domestic violence, I had to learn that healing is just not a word, right? It's an action step. Like, there's actions to those steps of healing. And there's also I've always said this from the time that I started on my journey, that there's no limits on healing, right? You have good days, you have bad days. But I think about that process, it's like, you're not being alone. So when you're creating these spaces, right? And I know for myself, it took me a while to realize like my strength and my power, right? And just realizing like I have to tap into that. Not only that, I had, my mentors and my coach and different people just tapping into that and seeing that what I didn't see, right? So I learned that I have to start doing that for other survivors that I'm coming in contact, right? Pouring into them the same way others poured into me when I first stepped on different platforms and different spaces. And letting them know straight up, like, these systems are not good. Like, you about to go through the system and you want to go through the same thing that I went through, but maybe something different, right? But I think for me, it's also always being trying to be that resource, but trying to create that space collectively where we can all gather and talk about the injustices of systems, whether we go through the courts, whether we go through ACS, or whether we're dealing with NYPD. And I know for myself, that's been my purpose on this journey, whether the work that I do in and outside of the system. My purpose is also making sure that survivors are implementing all the work, right, that impacts them, whether it's impacted families, parents, children as well. We need to be implemented in the work that's impacted us. And I feel like that's a part of creating safe spaces, whether it's doing a rally, whether it's coming together as impacted parents and just collectively doing something for us. self-care, right? Taking care of us mentally, emotionally, all of that. And these are things that I've done on myself, right? Did for myself, for my children that also seen different things and that need healing. And they just got tired of speaking, to the therapist. So now I had to turn into a therapist, and hold those conversations for my babies because they were heavy. And I think reality, that is what it is about creating safe spaces. Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, pretty much it's my girl always say, without creative ideas, safe spaces for me, as well as, having a space where parents can come together, whether it's a couple parents or mom, single mom, dads just need somewhere to just talk and vent, or activity spaces, for families to do as one. Even for the youth, they're into these games, try to break it down to social media and to give them something educational, but also enjoyable, because we know what they're into and what they like. That's our future, them. So we need a space for them. Us as parents, we stand firm, we support them, but then we need our spaces. I know as a mom and going through it, I didn't have that, but close friends or training programs where it was for me to be able to just sit back. If I tried to get on a computer, was my space and my time for me to learn things, look online and see things and look around and start talking to people that, were different. They didn't know me, I didn't know them. It's different conversations and getting a different outlook and input on, your feelings. Someone else is giving you opinion that doesn't know you, and be judgmental. Everyone can say they understand what you're going through, but they really don't. They want to be that comfort for you at the moment. And sometimes you need more intense. You don't always want to go to a therapist, So people say, go to therapy. That's not what they want to hear. For me, just finding something within my community spaces where we can open back up, like our community said, we don't have those things open up right now anymore. So there's nothing for no one really, but go out and try to find things.
Okay. Can you repeat that question one more time so I could just I'm at to talk off the cuff.
Absolutely. So what came up was around safe spaces a lot, right? And there are multiple levels of healing that have to take place. And you can tackle this at any level you want to, Nancy. There's systemic healing, right, for the injuries and harms that have been done to families. There's also that softer healing, that tender healing, that sometimes is about the self or the relationship with your kids, the familial healing. There's so much healing, but a lot of that relies on feeling safe enough to put yourself out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you've been a victim for many systems. It's really hard because as a survivor, you're always on survival mode. And that's how you're going to perceive the world, through those lenses. It does take healing within yourself. You must take the time to say, you know what, I need to heal myself if I'm going to heal others. I'm no good if I'm not good to myself. How can I be good to anybody else? And again, like I said, to create those spaces, you could do it in the community, but what about in the system? What about those parents that are in the system? We must also be able to create spaces like that for healing, because then the cycle continues. And then who is free? No one is free if it keeps on going and never stops. So I believe it should be holistic healing in every avenue for everyone to get what they need to get to become the best version of themselves and give back to their community, give back to other people that have been in your shoes, to hold them up when they are down and knocked down, and to be able to provide them and guide them in the process so they can, just fit into their purpose in life. And that also goes for their children and other people, your community, your neighbors, the person down the block, the person in the stores, the person in the supermarket. It's for everyone. It's just not catered to one, but it's for all.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I think that was the purpose of why Black Families Love and Unite was created, right? It wasn't just about myself or Imani or Nashia. It was collectively about impacted parents. Like, we wanted to create this safe space for us to come together, organize, bring to about. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say, and just reiterate what Nancy was saying as well.
Thank you so much, Shamara, Nancy, and Tanisha. I know we are at time. I just want to just a couple notes because the title is about healing and repair, to find honest feedback from community members, whether you have a therapist or not. I'm a clinical social worker, but if you don't want to talk to somebody like me, talk to somebody who will be honest with you and who is a reasonable person. Pouring into other people, in order to pour into others, you have to feel like you have something to give. So what Nancy talked about feeling like you have been good enough to yourself to be able to give to others. And so thank you so much for having me. I'm wrapping up. Thanks, Imani. I'm turning it back to you to close us out. You're wonderful. Thank you for this beautiful event. Amazing.
Thank you. So thank you so much. You know, at Blue, we're constantly talking about culturally relevant mental health interventions. And I just want to thank you all for this section. I want to thank you for raising this. I want to thank Trisha, Nancy, Shamara, and Tanisha, AKA Shamara and Tanisha, Salt and Pepper. Thank you. And lastly, like, thank you to all the presenters for making tonight a legendary show. So I want to end on this. When I was growing up, my mother would constantly teach me about Black history. It is important to understand where we come from and to know our history so that we can change history. We all have varying ideals, values, and perspectives. And I'm sure that not everyone in this space is an abolitionist. Conversations about reparations will ultimately bring out tensions. The tensions I'm addressing encompass several facets. To begin, there's the potent emotional impact. Reparations, while acknowledging past wrongs, can concurrently stir painful memories and emotions tied to one's involvement within the family policing system. The dynamics within communities can be profoundly influenced. So the receipt of reparations might incite envy, comparisons, or resentment amongst those not granted them, fostering divisions and potential conflicts. There is the intricate interplay of reconciliation and justice that arises. While some perceive reparations as a stride towards reconciliations, others raise questions about their efficacy and genuinely addressing the systemic roots that underline engagement within the child welfare or family policing system. Additionally, we encounter those who contend that families impacted by family policing somehow deserved it. The complexity is further intensified by power dynamics between the government, societal perspectives, and the media. You know, as Nashia stated earlier, this encompasses media influences, right? Beliefs in the system's necessity for protection and more. Recognizing these complexities is pivotal. They shift in accordance with the individual experiences, attitudes towards reparations, and the context within which they're extended. Within these challenges lie beacons of optimism, however. As Frederick Douglass, renowned abolitionist, astutely reminded us, without a struggle, there can be no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This quote serves as a resounding reminder that progress often stems from confronting challenges head on, as history has consistently shown. So we expect these tensions. We expect everyone to not agree. We expect people to not like us, but that will not stop us. It will not stop me. As we approach the fall season, we're gearing up for a subsequent discussion on reparations. During this follow-up, we'll collectively develop an action plan. So this webinar that you're attending now serves as an initial step in sparking dialogue within our community about the essence of repair. Our upcoming gathering that will take place in the fall will further outline actionable measures. So I encourage you all to maintain your connection and involvement with Black Families Loving Unite. And again, you can join us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by following @Black Families Loving Unite. We will be sending a follow-up email with more details on how you can stay connected. I want to thank everyone for being here. Your presence and participation have been invaluable in furthering this important conversation. Let us carry forward the tensions, curiosities, and hopes ignited by this webinar, driving us toward a future marked by justice, healing, and reparations for all affected by the challenges within the family policing system. Special thanks again to all of our presenters who helped make this happen, and thank you. And together, let us amplify, or let us continue to amplify, the voices, stories, and struggles of those impacted, working tirelessly for a brighter and more equitable future. Thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. Shamara and I appreciate it.